Yes. We follow Oregon budget law, so you're all for
Hey Travis. How was the day? Not too bad. Little bit hectic.
I can relate to that. Seems like a lot of turmoil of late too. Maybe you guys are lucky. I'm.
It's been a very busy start to the year.
Good morning. How you doing? Good. How are you? Good. I see you. Good to see you.
Well, Adam, that's it.
Yeah, I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters.
Joe Dictionary's here.
I will sit here and vote.
Sure.
That's a good question, but I'm not sure.
They got little names.
Yeah.
Nameplates for us.
Your name?
Steve Schmuck.
Oh, hi, Steve. Travis.
Travis, yes.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
Grab that. You want to?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Good to see you. Oh, good to see you. Well, so, move in a smaller space, looks like. Yeah, downside is quite a bit. John, what I was gonna ask.
Oh,
We've got 1,400 square feet and 200 of it is factored into that. It's not really most feasible.
There's room, I guess. I can.
Sure.
Remind me.
Yeah, yeah, it's working out. Yeah, yeah. I saw that,
It is a long way.
Main Street.
How many members?
That's all.
Those all.
It really, and that's what.
I received the packet.
Hey, that's what I said.
Being recorded.
I'm sure we're receiving a bunch of this stuff.
Back up your organ. And so I did.
Actually, he'll have to stop. Second. It's gotta be.
That's not a so that they're
All 90.
Only takes what?
It makes it easier.
I am interested, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're still getting on that. So, yeah, I mean, it's all big, yeah, they're getting it. Well, I mean, I don't think the hour. They might let them know before. Yeah.
Bill, I remember meeting you years ago when you were very county commissioner. Oh, and I always remember your slogan, information. Yes.
You'll report it somewhere.
That's just smooth and stuff.
Oh, it's good, okay.
Sorry.
First time I've seen you in person probably for years.
It's been a long time. Yeah, good grief. You've gotten older. Everybody else around me had.
Well, I sure had.
I'd say legislator.
It's been that long.
I'm sorry, it was when I was running for commissioner and you were with legislature. Hopefully they're over 10 years.
You using Zoom, guys?
Yeah, the Zoom webinar, which is a Zoom meeting or like the meeting version, everybody's around the table. Webinar, it's like there's a stage and there's an audience. And so we're doing the webinar. So there's a stage and we're all on the stage.
Cool, yeah. All the way there. Yeah, right. All right. Doing good. How's the drive? It's good.
Oh, that's one.
I don't know. That's a good question. Probably for our regular.
I don't know.
We're a long time away. See what else we can serve? I don't think that's in the. I don't think your arteries say that.
Lisa Harkin went over to LRAPA, but he's on the way over here.
Okay.
And then at that will be 7. Still one short for one.
We had them on there.
No, I don't see that over yet either.
And go to houses 8 days.
Wow.
For 62 of us.
Okay, I was gonna say, that's gotta be quite a.
But this year.
I was gonna say, it's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, our church did that for you. Used to go down there. Nice.
We run those.
There's Dawn. Dawn is one of our budget committee members.
Oh, yes, okay.
For Oak Ridge, I believe.
Yep.
So. Hi, Dawn. I see you there in the attendees. I'm voting you to panelists. There you go. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Dawn. And then when Lisa gets here, that will be a quorum.
There you go. Good time to go.
Up to the table.
Ready to go?
I think we are. I think we can go now, right?
Yep, we're having.
Want me to run this until we get a chair?
Good question, because we don't have a vice chair or a chair here.
I'm good. Yeah.
All right. Now, good morning. We'll call the meeting to order here. March 9th at 11 o'clock, and we're at Springfield City Hall for the LRAPA Budget Committee meeting. I'm the chair, Brian Cutchin from Oak Ridge, and I'll preside until we get a chairman elected, then hand it off. First order of business is introductions. So can we start on the Zoom platform and go around and introduce yourself? And let's see. First, I see Dawn Kenyon and Howard Saxion.
Hello, I'm Dawn Kenyon. I'm a city councilor in Oak Ridge.
Hi, I'm Howard Saxon. I'm a vice chair of LRAPA board and a City of Eugene appointee.
Are there any others on that?
The only others who are on are attendees, which at this point look to be all LRAPA staff.
Yeah. Okay, the rest is all RAPA staff, so we'll go beyond that and go to the room. If we want to go around the table.
Hey there, morning, Lisa Arkin, a budget committee member.
On this way. I'm Susanna Sprasha, the finance and HR director for LRAPA.
Steve Dietrich, the director for LRAPA.
Brian Kutcher, Mayor of Oak Ridge.
Robert Ball from Cottage Grove, budget committee member.
Mike Fleck, Cottage Grove City Council.
Joe Pishner, Springfield City Council. Steve Schmunk, Springfield.
Paul Metzler, Springfield Budget Committee appointee.
And around the perimeter, is that your staff?
Yes.
Okay.
And Chair there, Janine Parisi just joined. Janine, I promoted you to panelist, so she'll be hopping in here in a second, but FYI.
Okay. Janine, you want to introduce yourself? We've gone around the table already.
So I was just being promoted to a panelist, so it took a minute for my screen to switch over. Good morning, I'm Janine Parisi with, sorry, not with EWEB. Well, I kind of am, but here as a LRAPA board member.
Any budget committee members that I missed? Nothing heard. We'll move on with business, and that's number 3. And that's election of a budget chair and vice chair for 2023.
So normally we would have at least one of the, a budget chair or vice chair here. I don't think either one of those are in attendance today.
Yeah, well, Adam Rao was the budget chair last year, and then Steve, you were the vice chair. Steve's present here, but Adam Rao is not present at the moment.
Okay.
Guess what, Steve? I was just gonna say.
It's a duty then.
Yes, you relinquish duties to the vice chair. Okay.
All right, well, I guess call to order, which you've already done. Introductions have done. So we'll have election now, and so somebody will help me, please, in terms of decorum or what have you. I guess we'll take nominations for first chair. Joe?
I'd like to nominate Steve as our chair. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And
For our minutes recorder, so the minutes recorder will be doing this after log. So it was motion by Joe Pishner and second by Mike Fleck.
okay, thank you. All right, and all those in favor, say, raise your hand, I guess, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you for the confidence. All right, I guess we'll take nominations for vice chair.
Well, I think since Ruth just appeared, we should make Ruth our.
Moved by Mr. Black and seconded by Steve Schmunk that Ruth Leno's be vice chair. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you. All right. First on the agenda, reports a budget presentation. One of the staff will do presentation.
Yeah, so myself, Steve Dietrich, and I'll start out the presentation. Kind of goes along a lot with your budget narrative that you had in your board and your budget packet. And then Susanna will take up the last half of the slides that we're going to share with you this morning. So we have some slides to remind everyone about who LRAPA is and what our budget details. Since there's a slide up there. I plan to cover the first 6 slides or so. And then we'll go, and Susanna will go into the budget details after that. So on the next slide. Quick history about LRAPA and when we were formed in 1968, and 1 year shy when DEQ was formed. We're the only local air agency in the state of Oregon, and we have our partners here represented: Lane County, the cities of Cottage Grove, Eugene, Springfield, and you see our mission there. Next slide. So I plan to provide a brief overview of some of our programs organized by the funds that actually support them, starting with those in the general fund. This list here is everything that general fund can get into and then some. Then some special revenue funds will follow, and then grants, and then our metrics, which is actually our enterprise fund. So our LRAPA's ACDP program, air contaminant discharge permit program, is one of 2 air permitting programs administered by the agency. These are our minor sources of air emissions. And currently there are about 275 of those sources in Lane County. The Cleaner Air Oregon program is new since about 2018, and we have been working with DEQ to implement this new permitting requirement for air toxic emissions. And the rest of the items listed here in the bulleted form should look familiar to you, either from a program, public, or EPA reporting perspective to protect and improve air quality, and they're all part of the general fund scenario. Next slide. Challenges with the general fund. Basically, some general fund challenges include implementing programs and activities that are listed here represent the need to balance staff priorities, while the requirements to change and get more complex as we go along, and then the workload increases accordingly. So the emissions from wildfires increases the degree of difficulty in meeting EPA's particulate standards. When I talk about there, that's PM10 and PM2.5, which is only one of the 6 criteria pollutants that EPA sets national ambient air quality standards for. The next one here, calculating air toxics risk, public health requires a significant amount of staff time and an ever increasing interest by the public for information. And the air monitoring technology gap makes it hard to get accurate real-time data that we need to make timely. In addition, the overarching question on how to address environmental justice concerns and equity in underserved communities adds another layer of complexity and time to the work LRAPA does. At the same time, as we look for opportunities, there's a category there that we could increase revenues. There is a need to expand our public engagement, education, and messaging with a focus on health impacts so people of Lane County, including the city of Eugene, Springfield, Oak Ridge, and Cottage Grove, can make more informed choices on homewood heating and open burning. Now, we continue to examine our funding opportunities, such as with our partner fee methodology and our grants. And you're already familiar with our tags, both 1 and 2 in Oak Ridge, which I will touch on in a later slide coming up. And then upgrades and expansion of our existing ambient air monitoring network is another opportunity, especially from an air toxic sampling perspective in new areas to keep our air cleaner and support economic development goals. Next slide. Under the Special Revenue Fund is the Title V program. This is the other air permitting program in addition to the aforementioned ACDP program that I mentioned earlier. Title V permits are for major industrial sources of emissions. Currently, there are 14 Title V sources that have LRAPA permits. In this program, LRAPA issues operating permits, conducts inspections, evaluates compliance, and control technologies associated with air emissions from these facilities. For program challenges, the number of these facilities has been declining, which reduces revenue generation. The current fee structure uses a base fee, an annual emissions fee, and a specific activity fee that's set by the state legislature. Only Oregon DEQ increases these fees, usually by the CPI, and LRAPA uses these same adjustments. Unfortunately, the revenues are not keeping pace with the cost to run the program, and this is a requirement under the Clean Air Act, which we'll get into probably later on. At the same time, there are backlog goals that need to be met, requiring staff time and resources to achieve that goal. Under opportunities, explore the current fee structure with DEQ as well as other revenue possibilities, along with a review of how we allocate this fund. Next slide. Most of you are familiar with the TAG grants, both 1 and 2, received from EPA in fiscal year 2020 and 2022 respectively. These 2 grants span about 7 years in time and focus on the reduction of emissions from wood smoke activities like wood stove replacement, providing indoor air filtration, the community firewood program, local opacity code enforcement, chimney sweep vouchers, stove thermometers, wood moisture meters, and electronic reader board to provide timely community messaging. I listed all those because that's a lot of activities on the ground to implement the use of these TAG monies. The culmination of all these efforts in the Oak Ridge Westford area was redesignate. We were able to successfully get redesignation to attainment in September of 2022. And the maintenance plans for PM10 and PM 2.5 both were approved by EPA just a few months ago. But the work continues. We all know that the standards get re-examined every so often. Moving on to the next slide, in enterprise funds. It's also known as Airmetrics. Revenues are generated by the sale of our tactical air sampler, or TAS, as we like to call it. And we also provide calibration and unit rebuild services as part of that revenue stream. Airmetrics works with domestic and international customers with distributors in 15 countries. The program challenges include competition from monitor sales from other companies, and also new technology, fluctuating demand from the Asian market, and of course, our FTE level to staff the program, staff the Airmetrics. While the program opportunities, include the potential for new markets, expanding services and partnerships, the technology grants to fund product development is another area that we can look at as an opportunity to bolster our enterprise capabilities. The next slide this is where I usually turn it over to Susanna, and some of you have met her in previous meetings, some of you just meeting her today, and she's going to run us through the detailed portion of the budget. It corresponds again with your board, your packet that you received. Since Susanna is only 9 days on the job, she's doing her best to get up to speed with the LRAPA budget. So bear with her, bear with us. If you don't know the answer today, we will get back with you as soon as we can. Susanna?
So hello, everyone. As Steve said, I'm Susanna Spracher, and I'm your new finance and HR director. And I'm not new to government or fund accounting, but Julie was wonderful to write this budget before she left. So the packet that you're looking at was done by Julie. And so I'm going to give you a high level understanding of what I know we're going forward with. And then I have the team close by to help answer questions in our wonderful Friday emails as well. We made she made very small changes to this budget, knowing that there was going to be a handoff. So that way this budget is kind of simple this year. We don't have any big projects planned. So that'll kind of help as I talk you through these next few slides. Next slide, please. So I will be this year your contact person for your questions and your Friday updates. So there is my email address, and I know my name is fun to spell, but the B sounds more like a P in Italian, so to pronounce it, it's spa instead of the B sound. So there is my contact information for your questions as we go through the budget process. And for the people that are new to the budget committee, on page 5 of your budget document, kind of walks you through the committee's process. So if any of you have questions on that as the new people to be on the budget committee, please reach out to me and I can help you with those questions as we go forward. Next slide, please. You can also find this page on page 4 of your budget document. And the important part of this page really is to highlight the key dates coming up forward. April 13th, the budget committee will meet again at 11 a.m. to hopefully adopt this budget so that on May 11th, the board can approve it. So those are the key dates. But again, this is on page 4 of your budget document. Next slide, please. So we have 4 funds with LRAPA. We have our general fund that we have mostly our federal and state and local shared revenues and our permit fees. Our special revenue fund is where we house our Title V funding. And then our grant funding at this point is only holding the tag 1 and 2 grant. And our enterprise fund holds our air metrics program. Next slide, please. Like I said a few minutes ago, we made very little changes. So this is our revenue assumptions. Basically, we followed the 4% rule for the air contaminated program. The state funding was approved by a 2-year biannual decision on what those state fees will be. And then our local partners fees was decided at 3.3%. And that's what we're using for this year's budget. Our air metrics, our Title V, excuse me, we used the combination of the percentage recommended. We did a 5% increase and then added about 70,000 for the new businesses that are coming on to be in having permits, which comes out to about a $90,000 increase from last year's revenue. And then our tag funding, we're going to add about 3,400 in expenses for this year coming up. And then our air metrics, we had a small increase for the year coming up. Okay, next slide. So this one here I put together, this is the full $5 million budget with all of our funds. So this is a really nice way for you just to get a visual picture of how our revenue breaks out for the total $5 million budget. You can see that the general fund makes up 51% of our revenue that's coming in, and our enterprise for air metrics brings in 12%. Our tag grants 1 and 2 bring in 27% of the total funding, and our Title V brings in 5% of our total revenue funding for our budget going forward. Okay, next slide. For expenditures, we pretty much didn't do any special projects or anything changes. So we did a 2% market adjustment increase for wages and an overall 2% CPI rate increase for materials and services. And we continue to monitor our professional dues and training based on need of program. You'll see a small increase in there because we're onboarding to sell. So there'll be some additional training that will be for this coming fiscal year to get us successfully onboarded. We are in the process of looking at what we're going to be doing for our building and parking lot remodel. So at this point, we put a folder of 130,000 for next year as we're developing the plans, and we'll have more detail as that project unfolds and explain. But at this point, the 130 is really to make sure the parking lot is finished and kind of getting prepared for what we want the changes to be in our building project. Next slide. So what I did here, I did the same thing I did on revenue. This is our full $5 million. And so you can kind of get a visual of what our total personnel looks like for all funds combined. You can see that our personnel takes about 48% of our budget, and our materials and services is 49%. And you can see our capital project at this point has only 3% of the budget. And that seems reasonable when we have a lot of equipment and we have a lot of staff to accomplish our goals. So I think that percentage breakdown is within reason of what it should look like. So that's just a nice visual for you to see that. Okay, next slide. So from my understanding of my 9 days on duty here is that our goal is to add a 5-year projection to our board packets going forward. This is the sample of what I am going to be using going forward. And this is just a sample. So literally what this is literally just taking our basic percentage changes we see in revenue and overall 2% increase from year to year. There's been no analysis done to this at this point, but this is so you can get a feel for what it's going to look like going forward. And so it'll always be the approved budget and what it looks like for the next 4 years out. So you have a whole 5-year picture. And there will be a lot of analysis through the year to really get this well defined. And I do a lot of research because I really know it's important to understand what the economy is doing and how that affects us and what special projects are coming in and out of those forecasting years. So that's why you only have a template right now, because there is a lot involved to make this really effective. And at the bottom, you can see where all these little green messes. So, and this is a sample of only the general fund. You know that our fiscal policies at this point, our ending fund balance needs to be 120 days or 4 months of our expenditures to be in compliance. And so you can see that line there where it says for the 4 months, the 120 days at 800,900, that is the calculation of what that 4 months would look like. And then the next line down tells us if we're over or under. And then the green says, yes, we meet fiscal policy all 5 years out, which is wonderful. And then I will be also, this will also have the general fund, the Title V, and air metrics for these 5-year projections. So what I'd like to see, if you have comments and thoughts, if you have questions to say now, that would be great. Or if you have a chance to digest this, please add these to email questions as well. But I would like your feedback. I've used this with my past profession, and it's been a very helpful tool to really get a visual of what, so we can future plan. Because we know that we get an economic crash on a consistent basis. We just came out of one and we have another one coming. So this kind of helps us have those conversations to be proactive in front of what's coming.
Susanna, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
You're gonna have.
Actually, the chair recognized somebody.
So you ready for questions? So,
Yes, yes.
okay, well, I guess let's just start here.
Next slide.
Joe, go ahead.
Those, go back to the last.
Oh, sorry.
So as an example, you're talking about those rates that you're showing is projected out of the 2% increase of each one of those categories.
Yeah, except for one grant is a 4% that was in there. And then there's some other ones is every 2 years. So Julie kind of helped me put what the basic percentage for the revenue pieces are, but all of the materials and services is a flat 2% and personnel. And then for the capital project, we just did a flat 130 across for this template example, because we don't really have a plan yet.
So going down to the local partner dues, those increased to what rate?
I think we left it at 3.3 straight across, I think, in this example that I created. But then again, I haven't analyzed it or it's not accurate. That's why you can't hold any hat on this.
So that's not 2%.
No. The CPI for the expenses, yes.
Okay, so
Sorry about that.
the 2% CPI increases are only for, or are not for the
revenue section.
Revenue section, okay.
Yeah, I tried to follow, Julie helped me put that in there and I tried to follow what your normal pattern is for revenue.
Okay.
So, but again, it's not accurate because it needs a lot of analysis. This was just a sample. So I cannot sit here and honestly tell you that you are definitely in fiscal policy for 5 years. That helps.
So this is awesome. This is what I've been looking for years, and I think this is going to be wonderful. Are you, you mentioned you're going to do each of the funds. Are you also going to do one for the agency as a whole?
I don't think you need one as an agency as a whole, and I've never done it as a whole because every fund has its own rules and own expectations and own funding. So I do the 5-year projection for each type of fund. I can put one together and show what it would look like.
The problem for me is that, as you know, your FTE can shift between funds, and that's why I would also like to see one overall. Maybe not using the tag grants, maybe
Right.
using the other 3 funds and an overview. Because I think that, like I said, I mean, I look at our city budget as an example, and tracking those shifts. Between personnel times can be huge between funds. And so I think having an overall summary.
Yes. And if I can put that together, just know that I may tweak what our fiscal policy is at the bottom for that yes piece, but combining them all together is totally doable. It'll just change the rules for income compliance.
So as a follow-up to your question about the tag grant being an exception, because we're eagerly looking for other tag, or not tag, but other fund opportunities, we may come across another thing that functions a lot like a tag or something from the federal level that we'll be able to receive. We can also do those separately as well if it's helpful.
Yeah, and the thing about grants though is typically you get them and then you're spending them down. So it's not, consistent revenue and expenses. So that's why I would exclude it, because it's not consistent.
One thing I will add real quick, sorry. If we start to get more grants, I have samples in the past that I've used to be able to have a nice, easy sheet for you guys to see what grants and timelines look like. So if we do get more in the grant from besides tag, I would be able to at least have some kind of a sheet for you to see kind of the pattern that's happening, and I can create that as I go.
Yeah, so I'm a pictures guy. So as I look at the ending fund balance, if I was to graph that and also graph the 4-month expenditures, they're converging lines, looks like. So as you sort of fine tune this and get it accurate, we'll be able to project when those two lines will meet, right? Which is kind of, to me, a key decision point.
Yeah, and it's going to help you to understand the value of what our ending fund balance is really for and when we need to have it and how we have that as preparing. And then as this is developed, we'll be able to have really strong conversations if 120 days is really accurate for what we need for the changing that we're going. I've helped the school district in a city survive 2 strong economic crashes. And this understanding helped us be in front of tragedy. So that'll help us as we work together as a team going forward.
Ruth?
It would be helpful for me to understand what for your operational triggers, like what starts to demand funding increases or staffing? Is it more permit responses and more activities at a level? Because right now, this is the second year that we're hearing about the workload being higher than what the staffing can handle, or it's a stress. So I want to know what's the tipping point? Do we get to we're way delayed in responses, or what is it? So that is this going to meet what we anticipate of that increase or decrease? Because just seeing numbers, but we're failing to meet our goals as a performing agency, I need to understand how things operate a little better.
So, from the budget perspective, we could try to provide more detail there, but the other thing I want to mention is twice a year, we give a dashboard progress on our goals. And the next one coming up that we do a dashboard look-sees in April.
Okay.
And we do again in October.
So Travis, anybody online that's raised their hand or such?
No, not yet, but I will mention that Matt Keating has joined us now, who is a LRAPA board member. So welcome, Matt. And other than that, we have not seen any raised hands, but for those who are online, if you have a question or something you'd like to say, raise your hand and I'll spot it for Steve so we can be sure that he's aware that you'd like to speak.
And hopefully everyone online is being able to hear okay. Might keep our voices up if we can a little bit to facilitate that.
I can hear you all just fine. Thank you. And I have no questions at this point.
Thank you. Great. Okay, Joe.
So along with what Ruth was saying, we have impositions on us to do certain things, and that we're talking about, well, we have these different duties that we have to do, or assignments or tasks. It would be interesting to know, because we can assign ourselves tasks and duties and minimum standards or whatever you want to call it, and assign ourselves to death, as opposed to what are we doing that is mandated by some law or rule. And so I'm interested in doing what is mandated by law or rule. I'm not interested in self-imposed. And so there's a difference. And I wanted to see, there's 2 different points there. One is self-imposed requirements, how much we have operationally to do to meet those self-imposed requirements, and then what is mandated by law or rule. And if we're meeting those, where is that point? So financially.
Or how the financial piece fits that we accomplish that.
What is our minimum requirement financially? And then what is our self-imposed? Again, we can impose ourselves to death.
And that, you know, that's a great idea, Joe. And I guess the only thing that I think would be good to add to that is what's behind the self-imposition task. I mean, is there something that is rooted in that's the reason they're doing it? Because sometimes there are processes that mandate these kind of add-ons, but yeah,
First, Jeannie, go ahead, please. Janine, sorry, apologize.
Hey, thank you for that. I appreciate, if we are still talking about the 5-year projections, I'll hold my questions till we get into, I was just gonna move on to a couple of questions specific to some of the funds, but Susanna, tell me how you pronounce your name a little different.
I pronounce it Susanna, but it's,
Susanna.
thank you, Susanna.
I want to get it right. My childhood friend was Susanna, so it's going to take me a little while to get Susanna, but as a Janine, I appreciate getting the first name correct. So thank you for the 5-year projection. It's super helpful to see. We're on a little bit of a downward trajectory. So I think, Joe's question about, there's going to be a tipping point where we have to make some hard decisions about what we want to do and what we have to do so that we maintain that ending fund reserve and the 120 days or whatever the appropriate reserve is. It's nice to see that we have at least at the high level, some cushion there. So that gives us a long runway to have those deeper conversations. So I just wanted to welcome you, say hi, and put me in the queue when we're ready for the next round of questions. Thank you.
Howard.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I echo the 5-year projection. That's very helpful. I would like to see a 5-year projection, though, that assumed that there are no future grants like a tag or anything like that, because I think anything in the future is highly speculative, whether there'll be any federal or state funding for that. And I assume that such like the tag grant, that does help the agency's overhead and does pay for some expenses and things like that. So it'd be good to see a if you will, I wouldn't want to say worst case, but certainly a case where there wasn't some assumptions that we're going to be very successful in getting grants other than those that LRAPA would typically get from Oregon DEQ.
If I may add, thank you.
Please.
That's a good comment, Howard. One thing I was going to add to that is that back in November, we hired a budget analyst person. Her name's Amanda Atkins, and she was introduced to the board, I think last month. We hope to be able to expend a whole lot more time looking for grant opportunities other than things like the tag grant or monies that we get from EPA. So we're trying to staff up to do that exact function that you just described.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I still think that from a 5-year projection, it'd be good to assume that those aren't going to be available. And if we're successful, I mean, that's great. But, to try to project the agency's budget on potential future income, is, I feel, somewhat speculative. So we ought to, I don't know what they used to call it, like zero-based budgeting or something like that, but at least take that case. And then if you want to project some dollar amount that if we are successful in getting grants, it'd be good to look at that and to see how that affects LRAPA's budget and staffing levels and things like that. So I could see, 2 scenarios. Thank you.
So I guess in terms of discussion, I guess maybe if we get specific number type questions, and then obviously this has been kind of a Q&A as well, but so I guess maybe in terms of numbers, I have a question. So the Title V funding, is that, so you saying that there's $70,000 of projected new entrants or people that you expect to come on board, is that correct?
Yeah, and Max is on here if he wants to answer more specifically, but when I met with him, he gave me the projection that DEQ gave. And we lowered it a little bit, so we used 5%. Julie said 5% might be safer just in case. And then he had a list of new businesses coming on that we know that we're definitely billing in August. And that's about 70,000.
Okay, and the budget reflects those
Yes.
entrants, so it's not just the 14 you currently have.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, so,
Want more than that, you'll need max. That's how much I remember.
yeah, okay. Janine, go ahead.
I guess maybe if we just want to stick with Title V, fun questions. So do you know if one of those 3 new entrants is Arcimoto?
Let's let Max handle that.
Max, you there?
Hey, good afternoon, board members, Chair Hutchin and Janine. Yeah, so Arcimoto would be a simple ACDP. There wouldn't be a Title V.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other discussion, questions, Mike?
So just as a process question, so I've been through budget processes where we go through every line. I've been through ones where we just ask questions based on things that we've highlighted. So I guess just from process, how would we like to proceed was my question.
Well, I guess we've kind of had the 40,000 foot level. Let's go into more detail if you have detailed questions. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would actually, this is one, and I'm not trying to be a stickler at all, but I'm curious, one question I have is what is the final rate we got on PERS for entering into that? I know is projected at 10.something%. That's a Friday question that I would.
Yeah, it'll have to be added.
Yeah.
Did not even pull up first yet. I can't even log in yet.
I think they
Sorry.
published those, yeah. I don't think they published those yet.
Might be too early.
Okay, well, whenever that comes, I'd like to know what that is.
So it'll be a 2-year locked rate.
So with
I know what it is.
So with that question, I'm looking under general fund and I'm in the detail page, which is on page 20. And so I'm kind of looking at a couple of things. So salaries actually go down by 10,000. So did we shift FTE to a different fund or are we actually less FTE?
Are we down 1 FT?
John retired.
And we're not planning on replacing that position?
Not yet. For this budget, we're not sure.
Replace them already. We hired early.
Oh, so
So how do the numbers go down then, I guess is the question.
Some of it may be the salary of the new person.
Oh, because of tenure. Okay.
we can look that up and confirm, but
No, that's perfect.
John was a 32-year employee, so.
Okay, no, that's a perfect answer. I mean, you can confirm it, but yes. And then the other, so that's where I'm looking at the next line down on benefits and payrolls goes to my PERS question. So we're jumping from 260, and actually, if we're looking at our previous numbers, we're actually jumping significantly to 284. And so I guess I'm just wondering what the assumption is there. So is it insurance? Is it the PERS rate? I mean, what are making up those increases?
okay, I'll have to look that up.
I don't want to speculate, but I have an idea of what caused it, but I'll hold off.
So those are kind of actually in the whole budget, my two big.
Other budget line detail questions?
Yeah, I had one on that same page under fares and transportation. When a small item, but nevertheless, it's a big jump. You went from $1,500 in 22-23 up to over 6,000.
Fares
Page 20 down
low.
That's part of it. As part of the training, we'll be sending some team to Utah for more training in October. As well as, I don't know what else, so I'll have to give you more detail, but I do know that I did make sure we added some extra training for 2 members to go to Utah for Cassell training. But then I don't know what the rest makes it up. I'll have to let you know.
Could this also be that COVID impacted what we were doing and so the COVID's lasted so long that we're now actually out of our historic numbers for that.
You're exactly right, Mike. During the COVID, no one was traveling, no one was flying anywhere. Now we're starting to do more face-to-face, including training, and so we have to travel to get there.
Sure. Someone online, question?
Janine and Howard both have their hand raised.
Okay, Janine, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So sticking with the general fund, I see the health insurance is going down considerably, $60,000, just confirming that's correct, because I thought I read somewhere else that health insurance was increased by a certain percentage, that number I'm not going to remember.
I know, I missed that.
I will have to put that in the Friday email.
Okay, thank you. If I can keep going down the list.
Yes.
Professional services, the 136, 138, is that taking into account that the need for us to pay for legal? Remember before legal was kind of being built into the member dues and now it's not. So can you explain to me what those numbers represent and how we're addressing the new legal, paying for our own legal outside of the membership fees?
Janine, that's probably part of the answer. We can look at the rest of it and respond.
Okay, and then last question on that long list on public education. Can I get a little bit of better understanding what that is? Is that like materials and information that are going out to the public? Is that your website fees? Like what? It's a strange category under materials and supplies. So
You mean the public notice one?
Public education.
I
18360.
can help with that. Some of that, a big portion of that is our home mailing packets. So what we do is anytime there is a new property purchase through Lane County, we mail an informational packet that has essentially who LRAPA is, all of our programs, how to get connected with us. And that does fluctuate depending on how many sales that we see throughout the year. But that is a pretty, that incorporates the majority of that budget.
So that's all residential and commercial?
It's residential only.
Single family residential or multifamily?
It's from Lane County tax assessment and it's single family. So it's just property exchanges. So any renters who may be moving into a place, we're not able to get that information. It's just property exchanging or purchasing that takes place. And we send them those home packets.
Okay, I got one when I bought my house. It works. Well, let me, go ahead, Ruth, yes.
Oh, with Janine done?
Oh, well, I think Howard's next, so,
Oh,
but, go ahead, Ruth.
well, I was just gonna comment on another, this professional services. Are we looking to those resources to fill some of the performance gaps that staff can't do? That kind of a way this handling the workload is managed or not? Under professional services.
I don't want to speculate, so let's just,
I mean, is that a category that could potentially
could be,
be tapped for those costs?
Yes, that's where they would be correct if we had contract services. Exactly the list of contract services that are in there, I have to look that up. Yes, I didn't write the budget, but I will look and see exactly who's in there.
and then we can give you that breakdown.
Sure.
I mean, I do know that HR, what's the name of it?
HR answers.
Yeah, they're part of the process because they're helping with updating their manuals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything else past that.
Because when you look at 2020 actuals, it was at $46,000 and now we're almost $100,000 more. That, it'd be nice to know what's pushed. If it was a short-term person and it took care of needs and then it didn't justify having a salary or payroll person.
I can give you another example. We used to do a lot of the meeting notes by internal staff, then we started contracting that out. So it was more efficient that way,
Don't call it attorney.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Howard, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, this is not on general fund. It has to do with aerometrics. Last fall, I believe we had a presentation about aerometrics, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And so I guess I'd like to know, and I don't need the answer right now, but at what point are there going to be some decisions made as to how we're going to proceed with aerometrics? We're kind of in a almost status quo as far as the equipment and technology that's used. You know, we had some discussion earlier about looking at some changes to the technology and what's used for the samplers and you know, maybe strategic partnerships, et cetera. And so I haven't heard anything since. I'm very curious. You know, what's going to what are the future plans, and when is there going to be a decision made as to you know, what we're going to do with aerometrics? Because it just seems like we're, you know, it's been in kind of a little bit of a holding pattern, just based on the information I've received. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add, I'm interested in that discussion as well. I'm seeing it seems to me that R&D is an important aspect of that, and I don't see anything budgeted for that. So I guess part of that discussion. And let me also add, significant difference in the budget outlooks, as Mike mentioned, you know, a lot cleaner, more informative. Also, I want to point out the website. I was able to go and, you know, do some research. The website, tremendous change, improvement. So I wanted to point out that as well. A great work.
Appreciate that. I know Travis and a lot of our LRAPA staff worked very hard on that with that contractor to get that done. It's been live since September of last year.
That was with Uplink Spider.
Uplink Spider, yes.
That's great. It'd be great if those kind of things would be communicated to the board, just so that we know that there is some progress being made, at least on that front, because, you know, frankly, it's been kind of dead silence since we had that presentation. So just a request. Thank you.
So you're talking about aerometrics still? I mean, that's.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And could we get a copy, or is that on the website? What was presented last fall?
So last fall, it was a business plan that was presented.
Okay,
We plan to do that every year. We're also in between the business plans are trying to mull over those options that were actually expressed during that presentation. Some of them we don't know the answers to yet. And, you know, with Trinidad being a staff of one running the aerometrics, it takes a little while to continue business, but also try to look at what the business model needs to look like going forward.
Go.
So back to aerometrics. In regards to the line items, and correct me if I'm wrong. I hope I am, where it says annual operating surplus / deficit parenthesized. And obviously it appears as though aerometrics has been operating in the deficit, last year being an area in the tune of $60,000. Is that correct?
Less than that last statement.
So the 22-23 is a projection. It's an estimate. It's not solid. And yes, that 59,000 means that our expenditures was 59,000 more than actual revenue received for that fiscal year. So it's not a deficit because we have ending fund balance. And that's what that whole.
It's costing us money.
Yeah, a little bit,
So,
but not in the negative. But
close
yes,
to 60 grand though, right?
yes,
Okay.
is what it's projected.
Okay, so last year's actual, 2021 actual looks as though
56.
it's 56.2. So aerometrics is costing LRAPA between 50 some odd thousand and projected potentially of 60,000.
Well,
No, when you're talking, okay, yeah, but when you're talking from a government perspective of a fund balance,
Right.
yes, the actual revenue for that fiscal year, but we still have to remember that we're a fund base. So it only starts to cost when you see the ending fund balance disappear.
I understand.
Okay, just so we're on the same terminology since I'm new.
times in my life.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you and I are talking the same language.
You disappear, as there's a fairly significant fund balance.
Right.
You're not saying,
Yeah, that fund balance is starting to be gone, then we're really losing.
to Joe's point, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, but in that year, yes, revenue over expenditures was less.
Okay,
Yes.
so what I'm looking at is, for example, if this was my checkbook, right? I'm running an agency, I'm running a business.
Correct.
This is my checkbook, and I have a balance of 1.275 million.
Mhm.
And I see that my outflow is greater than my inflow, regardless of the balance.
Correct.
At some point, my outflow is going to decrease my current balance to zero.
Correct.
If that,
Yes, we're on the same page now, yes.
that trend does not change.
Right.
So my next question is that, or maybe statement / question, is that I question why we do it. In a sense that if this is the eventual arc is down, so do we keep doing it till it's zero and call it good and quit? Or do we cut losses and stop the program? No one's asking that elephant in the room.
Okay, so I'll start with saying something that for basic understanding of budgets. If you look at the general fund, we're -2, so that you have to remember that there's a lot of times that what's happening, we could spend more than expenditures.
Correct.
The second piece is this is the power of building the business plan and power of what the 5-year projection looks like. Because lots of things can happen before you would get to parametrics ending. So from me as an analyzing budget piece, we are nowhere, anywhere, any option I can see that we would be cutting this program because it's not really crashing. So that's for my perspective, this is a good program.
So maybe what I can do is ask Trinidad to give us a little bit of perspective, because he sees the sales and happening every day in the
Right.
work that he does. And I, in fact, could venture to say that some of it is we're still coming out of the COVID effects to some degree.
Right, and the numbers, the swing that I'm seeing is, of course, we see back in 2020 that the outlay or the outflow was $10,000 or $11,000, and then the projected is going to be 60. And so that's what raises my concern, and that's a rapid increase. That's a 500% increase over 4 years.
Sure, no, that concern does make sense, but I think what we really need to look at is the fact that in the period of 2011 to 2019, we really padded the bank account. We were probably running maybe a $30,000 surplus prior to 2011. Now we have that 1.3. So in any time period, we don't know what could happen. There's been a definite downturn in the economy. And our economy really is based off of the Asian market, and by our economy, Airmetrics, that's where our sales are at. So if they're having troubles, Airmetrics is going to kind of see some of that. It's turning around there, and we're looking to expand markets. We're looking to get into Latin America and South America and really get into mining, into the mining industry. More so, it's already happening in Africa, Ghana, Mali. These are the places that we're really doing good business at. I expect to see that in other markets. But bringing it back to these last 3 years, that's really directly attributed to the Asia market really just kind of struggling. I don't see it continuing.
Just want to make sure everyone online can hear the discussion, could hear Trinidad. Everybody okay with her? Janine, you still have your hand up. You have another question?
Yes, please. So on the Airmetrics, I guess a question and a request. So of course, this is of high interest to the board because this is a fund that is a little bit in jeopardy. We're very lucky that we have such a healthy ending fund balance that we can draw from. So it gives us a long runway to make some choices, but that doesn't mean that we should ignore kind of the trajectory. So I agree with, where Howard and Joe Pish are coming from here. I think what would be helpful would be to expand this budget a little bit more, maybe not at the detail level that the general fund budgets in with, line items like telephone, but I think it'd be helpful to just have a better sense of how much of your expenditures are related to materials and supplies that support your revenue versus how many of your expenditures are fixed costs that we don't really have a lot of control over. And therefore, that's where we're starting to, we don't have a lot of wiggle room, and we need the revenues to at least hit those base fixed costs. So I don't know that we've ever, given how the level of interest in this enterprise fund, I'm wondering if there's a way to get to the next level of detail that would help us feel more comfortable that we're kind of being brought along as the business plans being developed, as new markets are being explored, as partnerships are being developed. That might help the board in kind of where we're at with our kind of curiosity. And I think, it's our responsibility to be paying attention to this particular fund. So I put that out there as a request if the rest of the board feels like that would be helpful and that doesn't create too much additional work for a brand new finance manager. So, and then my question is the projections for revenues. So obviously 2021 was not a great year. 2022, 23 looks like we're bouncing back and we're close to the budget if things continue to move along the trajectory. Your proposed budget of 583, what's the basis of that number continuing to grow over your projected versus, maybe splitting the difference between your actual from 21, 22 to your projected? How'd you arrive at that projected number?
So it's a conservative 2% increase, and this is based on reports of interest, Google hits, amount of views to our website, as well as a new website that's being developed. It's actually almost live. So these are taken into consideration.
Did you hear all that?
And so just one more question. So am I reading this correctly that your expenditures are going down
That was my question.
from 606 to 558? Am I reading that right?
A lot of inventory is the question. So we're not seeing the balance sheet side of this?
Right, yeah, no, we'll have to get back to you on that. So the revenues are what I put my projections out. The expenditure, I don't think that was really touched. Well, I didn't have my hands on that, so I'll have to look into that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could jump in, that was actually kind of what I was gonna bring up too, because if we're, if our inventory's high and we're gonna actually spend that down, this kind of makes sense. But without seeing the balance sheet, we have no idea what that number is. So that would be great to have. The other thing I'm looking at that's caught my attention is transfers. We have both Airmetrics and Title V transferring money to the general fund. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering why, if Airmetrics is struggling, that's really kind of an unfair burden to, Airmetrics program. If, that they're now supporting but unless there's a direct correlation. I mean, if there's some expense that Airmetrics has in the general fund.
There is a weight from the admin side of the LRAPA that is supporting Aerometrics. So yes, I do not know the methodology or the gap accounting rules that are being used to do that right now. And I see that historically it's been kind of a flat number. It's something I plan to look at. So it's honestly an answer I'm not sure I could do very well for one of the Friday updates. Because one of the to-do lists that Julie gave me, she really wanted me, that she had planned is to really look at the methodology for the transfer that are being done and give that a fresh eye. So it'll need a fresh eye.
Yeah, my understanding is that the transfer is above what the administrative services are billing to Airmetrics. So that is something, that's what I thought. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I remember years ago, there was a car that we were purchasing that was a transfer out of Airmetrics into, so I guess like I said, I'm just curious. So if we can kind of look into that, that would be great.
That's a fair question.
Good question.
Okay, more discussions, you have a hand up, Janine, go ahead.
I'm on a roll. I'm waiting for Counselor Keating to jump in. He's unusually quiet, but until he gets there, I'm gonna jump in again.
I'm standing by and ready, Jim.
I'm sure you are. All right, local dues, back to the general fund, unless there's more questions on the air metrics. I don't want to bounce around too much. Is that okay to go to the general fund again?
Hold on, we'll exhaust our metrics here for a moment for, you just hold on, great, thank you.
Sorry, Joe. I just have one more air metrics question back when it comes back to the support that they're paying for administrative assistance, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to know when or how often that is assessed, so that way we are staying current with how much air metrics is a burden to a LRAPA and that they're paying their share, paying their fair. So
In the past, I have no idea. Going forward, transfers in my life of finance director is analyzed every single year. When we build the budget, we analyze the transfer process.
And that may be
I can't
your
speak to
history.
the past.
That may be your history. I just want to know, confirm that when is that being done with our air metrics and how we've been doing it? I want to make sure that that's being maintained or been made current.
Yes.
Well, and then let me, on air metrics, I expressed last year, I think that I have a question about whether LRAPA should be involved in a business enterprise to the extent it contributes to the organization. That might be justification, but still I'm concerned with that, both from just a fundamental problem and from a skewing the core mission, because and then if Airmetrics is going to continue, it seems to me that there ought to be budgeted, perhaps even dip into reserves and see what happens, some marketing and some R&D. Now, I don't know whether the R&D would be beneficial, but clearly some marketing of the current product. And maybe you could comment in terms of what, that's not reflected in the budget.
Absolutely, that's great. So that is one of my concerns is I don't like to see, obviously our fund balance decrease anymore because it does get attention and it does look, so 59,918, 71,984, like these are the projected losses. So imagine if we were to add another full-time employee with superior tech, knowledge, and they could design a sampler for us. We might see that jump to maybe 140. And how long does it take for a new product that's been developed to gain traction in the market? Our ending fund balance might drop by, continuously for 140 grand, 200 grand per year. That really starts to get your attention. So the fact that you're looking at that and questioning why isn't this happening? I think it's great that you're willing to see that fund balance go down. But to answer your question, we are fully supported by the business activities that are performed at Airmetrics. If I can read something really quick. Airmetrics is accounted for as an enterprise fund within a governmental agency. For the state of Oregon, enterprise fund is defined as a fund that provides goods and services to the general public, where all or most of the costs involved are primarily paid for in the form of charges to the users of such services. For LRAPA, this means that the costs associated with Airmetrics are expected to be covered by sales and services offered by the business activity. And that's what happens.
I would just, from my background, suggest that if this is an enterprise account and a business, it needs to stand on its own 2 feet. You can't keep pulling money from other funds to support this when this needs to be looked at maybe more critically in terms of your pricing of your product and services so that it can balance out what your costs and expenses are. That would be my concern.
Certainly, it does fully support itself. So it's not pulling from any other fund. I mean, it might be channeled or funneled through the general fund, but Airmetrics doesn't per se rely on or it's not held up by the general fund.
Yeah.
It's fully supported. So
The transfers are based on the support of the general fund, just like your water, your sewer, there is a transfer that's made from your enterprise funds, from your cities, from your sewer, your water, your transportation, and your stormwater. There's a transfer that's made from those funds to the general fund because the general fund is doing the weight of the work. Unfortunately, I don't understand the formula that's used for your transfers, but the transfers that you see are based on that same logic that your utility funds are supporting. Because utility funds are your enterprise funds and they have to stand alone. So I wish I could understand how the transfers, that would help you with that statement, but we will over time
And we're
together.
audited like crazy, so I mean, obviously it's appropriate, we're just trying to find out
Right.
the why, the what it is and the why.
And these are great questions. These will help me build what you want to see.
Hold on, Ruth. So Matt, was this a related to Airmetrics? You have your hand up? If not, we'll.
It is related to Airmetrics, yes, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair. I appreciate the longing to ask why. I am concerned about, I guess I am concerned about the longing to pull a plug on a 31-year-old program that provides a critical need for portable ambient air sampling. What I see is a flat line or even a decline since 2020 in sales revenue. But what's piqued my interest is the international opportunities. I see that there are relationships with Norway and with Japan. I'd like to learn more about those international opportunities and more about the domestic partnerships, including but not limited to the U.S. Army, the EPA, the DEQ in Utah, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe in particular. I think this is a learning opportunity, not just for me, but for colleagues. And I think that this board could learn a bit more about the history and the who is involved and the opportunities for Airmetrics growth. I'll just leave that there and happy to talk about other pieces of the budget as they come up. But this has been a stimulating conversation, and I think that there's a real opportunity in the near future to learn more about the partnership and the enterprise fund as it exists.
Ruth, go ahead.
And so in general, I'm glad to hear there's a business plan that's being updated, but this kind of feels like the cart before the horse, that if we're looking at projected need, and how's that going to guarantee to align with the business budget and business plan we haven't seen yet. So when was that going to be available? Is it going to be before the May decision by the board?
I do not know that we'll have another business plan presentation before then, no.
That was done in November, so.
Okay, so we should be more familiar as a budget committee with that business plan. And I'll make a point of reviewing it before the next
We
meeting.
can get you a copy of
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's online on the website.
And I'll do that. And I think what we're just talking about, I just want to feel comfortable that what we're doing in expenditures is aligning and supporting what's being outlined in the business plan. And if there is something we're not paying attention to, or we're leaving out, or there's an addition that I'm not noticing, the plan will help guide.
So to clarify, so the fund balance was generated by activity from Airmetrics, correct, in years past?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
That was actually below 100,000 as of, I want to say 2010 or 11. So,
Okay. Well, again, from my perspective, businesses are cyclical, considering the last 3 years of disruption of the economy. It just seems like, I guess the board, if you will, needs to make a decision in terms of whether they want to be in business or not. But if they do, it seems like something ought to get off dead center. And if the, Asian market, I don't know, China's still in, I believe, having trouble and will for the next 24 months. But, if there's opportunities to market in areas that you believe are, growing or what have you, that may be an answer to this. But again, the board needs to decide whether they want to be in business. That's my perspective. Any other, with regard to Airmetrics, go ahead. Mike.
Just a quick comment, and I actually appreciate, Councilor Keating's comments, because years ago, Aerometrics made a huge amount of money. Went through a downturn. And I'm trying to remember what we did that brought sales back up, like you mentioned, from 2010. And I seem to remember in our report from November talking about how technology changed. So I really appreciate the comments about R&D. Because if we are going to manage this, we really should be looking at how can we be competitive again? Because that was one of the neat things about the original package is that it was a very low cost way to do testing that, met a lot of criteria, maybe not all of them, but, and it was designed by one of, our employees at the time. And so I'm not ready to make any decision on this. I mean, we certainly still have a huge fund balance, but I think that it's very important for us to have these conversations to look at what does our future hold. So I guess I just wanted to kind of clarify that I'm not ready to give up. I do think it's worth us scrutinizing and having a really good look at, where we're going. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, I wouldn't mind seeing that on some of our programs we have is what our FTE levels are. Or, it comes to personnel and even in the LRAPA end of things, what our current FTE is. We can see it from year to year. Changes. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Oh, you mean the changes in just in staff?
Yeah, the FTE. So like what FTE do we have at Aerometrics? What FTE do we have in LRAPA? And so we can, seems like it'd be a simple line. So that way we can see if there's changes year to year, if there's an increase or decrease, whatnot, would that be a result of an increase or decrease of staff, et cetera? That would probably eliminate a lot of questions.
Are you wanting it per fund? You want it per fund, right? So you would want to see the FTE that supports the general fund and Title V, right? I just want to make sure so I know what I'm building.
You have personnel services. Seems like that would make sense.
The fund balance, fund level would be the easiest, okay?
And I can't speak for the whole board, but we need to come to a consensus as far as if that's something the board would like to see.
That's something the board wants to see before we spend time doing it.
Exactly. I don't like personal assignments.
It makes perfect sense though, to see that.
It happens.
Yeah, it's no.
But just to add a little wrinkle here, we've actually had many years where we budgeted 19 and actually did not typically have those positions filled. So, the actual versus budget is not always the same.
Right.
This is true because you're writing a budget right now that we're gonna actually not start till July. And we're gonna live with it for a year. So as soon as the ink is dry on this budget, it's outdated. It's because of the timing of how we have to follow Oregon budget law. And this is why we have it in Oregon budget law has this budget revisions and that kind of stuff. And we have our monthly discussions of budget to actuals, because it is really hard to decide what we're gonna do. We're gonna start, 5 months from now. It's tough.
So I guess we're back, kind of a general discussion now. Janine, go ahead. You had some other general discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for the healthy aerometric conversation. Like I said, just kind of, I think having a little bit better detailed budget for that fund would probably help the board in its future conversations. So I'll just put that back out there one more time. I want to appreciate back to the general fund. I hope folks notice that there is a $30,000 contingency in there for unexpected PERS costs. So Mike, I know you had a lot of concerns about, fluctuations in liability that might come to the agency by making that decision. And we talked about having a separate contingency to address that. And I see that number is in the budget and I just wanted to appreciate that. So thank you for offering us that cushion. I have a question on page 19, the local dues. So I don't understand why the proposed 2023-24 budget has the same number as the 2022-2023 budget. And I thought that we had agreed that that was raising by this fixed amount that Joe Pish had negotiated with City of Springfield, which then got kind of rolled across all local dues agencies. So can someone help me understand this better?
Why it's the same?
Yeah. Don't know. I do not know.
Shouldn't that have gone up by some fixed percent? Wasn't that the board decision at the previous meeting or the meeting before that?
It was three something, Janine.
3.3%.
Yes. And some went down because Cresswell Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge never changed their rates. And so what I asked for was parity so that we were actually on the same population doing the same. So it was more than just a 3.3. There was actually an adjustment.
Based on population.
Yeah.
So that was across the board and all the members are paying on the same levels.
So I just think for that Friday conversation, we should probably double check that 195 number. In addition to the health numbers that were in the other personnel expenses. The benefit and health, because that was the 122, that didn't seem quite right to me either.
Which one?
Oh, that was in the general fund, that was the
Benefits, health insurance. So I think there's two questions that I just want to double check that those numbers are correct.
Yes. Yeah, I have down to look at all of the personnel and explain that one. And I will look at this revenue, and then for the general fund to recap, professional service needs some more detail. And you want a little more detail, the fares and transfers as well. And then the public relations
I
Travis.
think I understood that one. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that's what I have on my list so far.
Okay, thank you so much.
And with that, sorry, the numbers in that same column up in the revenues and transfers, it's almost exactly the same for previous year. The only change is other revenues.
Are you still on 19?
and transfers, yes. 19. So, would be federal and state revenues and local. So that's just another place that's going to be edited when you change that one.
Okay.
Okay. Other discussion? Jeannie, you still have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
I was waiting to see if somebody else wanted to get in the queue, but since nobody's jumping in, can someone tell me where Cleaner Air Oregon permit fees live, and should that be its own line item in the future?
Look on page 19. See the detail. This is the detail. Is that one of those?
You talked about those. Not for the money. Stephen, folks coming in.
Yeah.
That's big.
Down here under permit fees, Cleaner Air Oregon.
Oh, if you look on page 19, on the general fund detail, go down a little bit,
Under permit fees.
it's there, and it is on its own line. There it is.
Yep, 307,000.
Which begs the question sorry, Janine, can I jump in with the detail? When you look on page 15 in the Cleaner Air Oregon paragraph, the second paragraph, the list of approximate 65 sources includes all the permittees. That's a much lower number than what was in last year's budget, yet we're seeing the same revenue amount. So I'm not sure that reflects.
Max that number for us.
I don't know, this was, I'm not sure, I'll have to see why page 15 is not the same. And I can add that. I don't know if this was an oversight. Because as someone leaving, writing the budget and this booking, so it might have been might be a oopsie.
Yeah, because the previous year had about 80-ish
You're right. Yeah.
committees, and so unless they're willing to pay more.
Okay. Okay, well, so if I could, I've got a question, and this is not a budget related to just a general question I'd asked emailed about this, but I'm curious about the presentation, the overall presentation. On the front cover, it says there are 3 things apparently that are important: equity, involvement, partners. I'm confused about what equity is. Can somebody help me with that?
Yes.
You had two good.
Yeah, so
Talked about earlier.
when we refer to equity, that is acknowledging that our services are for all residents of Lane County, regardless of any sort of socioeconomic or racial standing they may have, and recognizing that some members of our community may express or be exposed to more pollution than others in terms of industrial or wildfire pollution, and ensuring that our services are equitable across all of Lane County. And so examples of equity in our work are things like up in Oak Ridge, where we're doing our targeted airshed grant program, which is not something that the EPA says we have to make any socioeconomic considerations to who receives that work and that benefit, but we are making decisions to target those with the greatest environmental or social vulnerability to make sure that they are benefiting greatest from those type of programs for others. So that's the intent of using the term equity and what equity means to LRAPA.
Okay, well, so I still don't understand that. I mean, clean air is clean air for everyone. So you're suggesting that the person that might have a home up there that's, very wealthy would get some kind of different consideration than the person that is, used to work in a mill is now on Social Security?
It's a consideration of, so like with targeted airshed grant, the work that we have in Oak Ridge. There's no income requirement or threshold that's considered to benefit from the work, but it is something that is being considered, looked at when we're prioritizing who receives that work, as well as where people are located. So there are parts of town where air quality is worse than other parts of town. So it's prioritizing work in those locations versus other parts of town. So that way it's a equitable level of service. So everybody has that opportunity to have access to that clean air. And we're not focusing work in a part of town where the air quality isn't generally as bad as other parts of town. Because everybody should have the same clean air and not some parts of our community. So in that example, that's where that plays.
So this is purely an economic valuation or consideration.
I would say that it's it's a recognition of social, environmental, and health vulnerabilities that people have, and recognizing that and letting that information inform how we engage the community and how we conduct our work.
I guess I'm still not getting this. I mean, I don't understand. So you can only evaluate these people based on a couple of things. There's economics, okay, and then their social, or and I'm not sure what that would be in terms of air quality. So
when we look at air quality, we look at it as the entire airshed. We base it on the science of our monitors and the data that we get from our regulated sources. Okay, we are able to judge the health of that airshed, just like EPA does when they call up a place attainment or non-attainment. We look at the science, what's causing the impacts on that airshed, which is not individual homeowners as much as it is an industry or something else going on down the street like a wildfire. We look at the causes that affect the air quality, but how we distribute equity is the fairness of how we do our work to lower that threshold of what everyone's exposed to, regardless of where they live.
okay, well, okay.
And it's the same way.
When I think about this, so I appreciate the question. I think this is a good conversation for folks to think about what equity means. I don't know how it relates necessarily directly to the budget, but a good example might be when we're doing public information outreach, having materials available in both Spanish and English might be a good example of how you might spend a little bit more time and money to make sure that we have multilingual information for communities who need to see something in a different format. So that might be one example. Another example that comes to mind is, up in Oak Ridge, when we were having all that terrible wildfire smoke incursion, if you're a person of means, you can maybe leave town, get out of the terrible air quality for a weekend. You can go down to the coast, or you can go live with your mother-in-law in Bend. But if you are not of means, you're maybe unable to evacuate to cleaner air. And if you're in a house that's poorly insulated, you're basically breathing wildfire smoke for weeks and weeks at a time. So these are considerations that are important. We have to understand that, yeah, we're all breathing the same air, but some people have more capacity and ability to mitigate, and some people do not. And to me, that's what equity means. But it also means, I think, in general, that we're treating all industries fairly, that everyone has access to the same information, the same timely service. So, it's a big, complicated, it can mean different things to different people. So I appreciate trying to have a better understanding of how the agency is defining that and how it's directing their work, targeting their work differently. So I appreciate the question, and probably it does deserve more conversation at the board level. But that's my perspective. When I see that word, that's what I think of. I don't know if that helps.
Appreciate the discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I guess in terms of, we've had Q&A. Any other questions or comments or such?
Just one, as we go through this over the next few weeks, go through the budget, it's okay to email with questions.
I think that would be appropriate. Yeah.
So Friday, so questions will go in, and then this, what, tomorrow or?
Next Friday, I
Next
think it's
Friday?
the first answer week,
Okay.
yes. So all these questions that I gathered today and anything else you email me in the next few days will all get answered next Friday, and then every Friday from that will be the answers
Till we get to the budget process.
till we get to the budget process.
For me, once a week.
No.
No.
Email.
Okay, so
More, but the emails, I understand.
So emails in and directly to you. Okay. And then you'll respond Friday. And so if someone needs a follow-up question Tuesday, they send another next Friday, you would then respond to those questions until, and then the meeting on the 13th.
We can jump on one more, if we can just add it to the list here on page 21, where it shows revenue and fees, shows a significant jump from 2023 to 22, 23 to 23, 24. So it goes from 424,000 to 515. Just a quick.
That's the 5% plus the 70,000. So if the math worked like it was supposed to, and then I will double check and email that too, but.
About a 5 increase.
Yeah, it should have done,
Plus that 5%. It's a new committee plus 5%.
yes, it's what it's supposed to be, but I'll double check and I'll resend that email out too.
Indeed.
That's what it was supposed to do.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I had a question on page 12, areas of opportunity. The last sentence in the paragraph there is about seeking new grant opportunities to reduce forest fuel loads. And I noticed in the complaints section, there was a surprising number of complaints about slash burning. I don't know who to direct the question to. And so I just wanted to ask a few questions about.
We don't
that
regulate, by the way. Yeah.
Right, so I'm just curious, just asking a question about it. Sounds like a great opportunity to me, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that. If this is the right group.
You're talking page 12.
I'm looking at page 12, and I don't see what you.
Well, I'm on the,
It's up here, it's this opportunities, she's looking here, I'm sorry, I was.
I'm on the PDF version, sorry.
No, you're okay, you're on.
Areas of opportunity.
Reduce forest fuel.
Talking about Oak Ridge and Westbury.
Yeah. Oh. Okay.
So that, Lisa, is an effort that LRAPA is exploring with Southern Willamette Solutions to go after the environmental justice government to government grant. And the intent there is to come up with a collaborative approach at forest management and fuel reduction loads in and around the Oak Ridge area, as well as, if we get the grant, to take on efforts of home hardening and smoke proofing of homes, which home hardening is an example of, there's a home that has siding that is not good for being resistant to heat and could easily catch on fire. Replacing that siding with something that is more effective at staying, safe or not catching fire in that wildfire event, as well as providing more capacity to Southern Willamette Solutions to then be the boots on the ground to bring people into this program. So that's some of those areas of opportunity in the fuel reduction work and load. And then other ideas, this is more from a environmental permitting perspective and not so much under a grant opportunity, but trying to spend time and effort identifying some of the permitting red tape, I guess you could say, in things using technology. So air curtain incinerators is a new form of technology that's a much better way to basically burn things with creating very little smoke. The way EPA regulations work is it's considered a Title V permit, which really discourages people from wanting to use that technology because of the fee cost and the complications of that. So from a LRAPA, working with the EPA and DEQ to potentially, or to raise this as an issue, so that way on the federal level, rules can be changed. So that way it allows more ability for people to take advantage of it.
And I did bring that up to EPA in our annual performance partnership agreement last week with EPA Region 10 and gave them the on the boots, on the ground example of air curtain incinerator and the permit fees to get that versus $25 for 25 cents per ton for the U.S. Forest Service to let the slash pile burn. What do you think got chosen? And I challenged EPA to help fix that.
Yeah, thank you.
So go ahead, Matt.
Great, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just seeking clarification, and not that I need it now, but if I could put myself, or if I could get an answer back about the fund or the formula used for agency partner dues. I see that Lane County and Eugene have gone up, and well, Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge have gone down, and Eugene is pretty significantly higher than our county partners. I would just love some clarification about the formula that's being used, so I can take that back to our team in Eugene.
Okay. It needs the explanation for that, but yeah, we'll provide that. Okay. Dawn, you have a question or comments?
Yes, I wanted to find out specifically where to email the questions that we might have. Is it directly to Susanna or to the local budget email?
No, to me, to my name, spraja@gmail or Mama Mia at I don't even know my email address. Travis, do you mind throwing that slide back out so they can copy that easier, please? Okay, I'll do that.
So everybody will get an email with the contact.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll send that out this evening, an email to all of you.
Okay, wonderful. And I just wanted to add that I do appreciate the conversation that everyone's having.
Go ahead, Travis.
If I can, I do need to apologize on behalf or for myself, but an apology for Adam Rue, who was not here today. The email contact that I was using for Adam was his eWeb email, which he no longer works at eWeb, so he was not receiving any of our outreach. He did notify us and our board secretary of that change, and I forgot it. So I just want to make you all aware that his absence today was my mistake. And so I just want to make everybody aware that I was using the incorrect email, so he did not receive that information.
And then to add to that, Terry Fitzpatrick, who is not here today, is also on the board, has said he is resigned from the board due to medical issues, significant medical issues. And so he may be taken care of that, or may involve the next anywhere from 3 months to a year to take it, to address, so. He's no longer representing Springfield. I am currently looking for a replacement.
Okay,
Oh, I will. Okay.
all right, well, unless other questions or comments,
I would just like to say thank you all for your questions. These are absolutely amazing questions and wonderful. This will really help me shape going forward and how I can adapt to meet your needs. So thank you. This is fantastic.
you got thrown in the deep end.
Oh, yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I love the passion that you have. I'm very community oriented and I'm here because I'm passionate about community. So no, I love it. And I will answer all your questions and hopefully shape some of your documents going forward to help you with these. So this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Also, I don't know if we vote on adjournment or you just go, we are adjourned.
Well, thank you for leading us today.
It's about April Fool's Day, right?
And I'll mention to everybody that we do have pizza over here, so help yourselves if you're interested. There's a 15-minute break before we get into the board of directors meeting, which is up next. So at about 5 minutes before.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Do that again,
Thank
Brian.
you.
My apologies.
So we're bringing the LRAPA Board of Directors meeting to order. It's 12:58, March 9th, and we are still at Springfield City Hall. Item 2 is adjustments to the agenda. Do any directors have an adjustment to the agenda?
All right, so Chair Brian, members of the board, I want to add and delete one. So I'd like to add under new business, a category to talk about House Bill 3229. And then we also found out before, just yesterday, that the auditor is not ready to present the audit report. That's item number 5 on the agenda. So we can omit that for this agenda.
And Travis, it looks like Mr. Keating's trying to get in as a panelist.
Oh, is he? I'm sorry, Matt. Let me look and I'm in there.
That's the changes that I have.
Thanks very much. Any concerns with that?
Thank you.
Item 3, which is public participation. My level will be 3 minutes per speaker. And first, we'll start with comments on an item on today's agenda. Anyone on the Zoom platform have any comments from the public?
The only people we have here from the public is Jim Daniels, who is the chair of our Citizen Advisory Committee, and I assume that he is here just to listen. But if that's otherwise, raise your hand, Jim, and you can speak, but my assumption is he's just here to listen. And other than that, we have no other members of the public.
Okay, and in the room, we're organic to LRAPA. So B, and this topic's not included on today's agenda, but again, we still, unless Jim wants to speak on that, but any comments from board members before we get started?
I just want to reiterate, Terry Patrick's resignation from this board, spoken earlier during the budget committee.
Could I request we send, some sort of thank you plaque, something along those lines?
Yes.
And he did say, I could tell you what he is going to do or have done. He's going to have to do a double lung transplant.
How long has he served?
I don't know.
Since 2020, 2021.
I would have guessed 3 years.
2 to 3 years.
But I think he was exposed to something. He was a Eugene police officer for years and had to retire due to his breathing issues and be related to something he may have been exposed to. So it's great to hear that.
Yeah, we'll take care of the plaque.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on to item 4, and that's the consent calendar. Can I hear a motion?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second,
Motion made by Joe, seconded by Mike. Call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Right.
Any opposed?
you might want to,
Yeah, I mean, I will. Stop sharing.
Nothing heard? Consent agenda approved. Under reports, again, item 5 has been tabled for.
Mr. Chair, I'm an aye to approve the consent calendar. My phone is freezing on me though.
Thanks very much. We got you. Under reports, item 5 has been postponed to another meeting.
Yes.
Item 6 is the Citizens Advisory Committee, and is Jim going to speak to that?
Yes, Jim Daniels will speak to that.
So Jim, I just promoted him to panelist, so as he gets over onto the panelist side, he'll be able to unmute himself. Thank you.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. Is it a go for me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the bulk of our discussion in the February meeting was sort of a brainstorming session on expanding a survey to have a branch to cover members of the public. And we also had some discussion about LRAPA forms, and no big conclusions on any of that, but expect that work to continue on both fronts. And that covers it for the committee, I think.
Okay. Any questions of Jim from the board? Thank you very much, Jim.
oh,
Yeah. I'm sorry, Janine?
Yeah, thank you. Not a question, but just a thought that came up for me in our earlier budget committee meeting. There is a, not insubstantial line item in there for the Homewood heating packets that are sent out to all new, for every home transaction. And it just made me wonder if, the value proposition there, is there a better way to get information out to new homeowners that doesn't involve paper? I don't know if we mail them out separately, or if that's part of when you sign your mortgage, you get 4,000 pages worth of paperwork that you're never going to look at again. So I don't want to create work, or, Travis, I'm sure you've thought through this and if this is the best methodology, but if there's a nugget there for just improvement in terms of getting the message out as well, or perhaps even better at a lower cost, given that mailing costs continue to go up. I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential little project for consideration. Don't need to go into it here, but if there's some communication that the Citizen Advisory Committee and Travis wanted to have, I would fully support that. This is totally in the weeds, so I also just feel like if everyone's good, that's fine too.
Well, that sounds like a worthy project if the board decides they'd like us to take a look at that.
Next.
Not hearing a lot of enthusiasm for it, Jim. So I think, maybe you and Travis can just touch base and see if there's anything there.
Okay, yeah, we can have that discussion.
Janine, I'll offer that those home mailing packets have been something that LRAPA has done even prior to when I started. And I do think that there is potential for more online and media driven forms of outreach, promotion that haven't been explored fully by Public Affairs Department at LRAPA. And I think there could be value in hearing some CAC input on thoughts of what could be great for future potential outreach methods. Because I definitely agree that, or the process is we have our packets that get mailed out individually to new homes. So we receive the sales list from Lane County and tax assessment, and then we forward it on to our printers, who then print the packets and then put them in an envelope and then send it to the mail. The cost is relatively high, I don't disagree. And so I think there is some value in assessing where that goes. But it's a kind of prioritizing, what's urgent versus important and that kind of thing.
Thank you for that perspective, Travis. I really appreciate you. And I should have said it earlier, but thank you for just stepping up and taking accountability for a really small error that resulted in Adam not being able to make the meeting. I have a lot of respect for that. So thank you for doing that in a public setting.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, Janine, my silence was not in opposition, just as in, nope, that sounds fine. So, that was kind of it.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right, moving on to item 7, which is the director's report agency activities for February.
So Chair Brian, members of the board, just as we've done recently in the not too distant past with previous board meetings, I wasn't going to go through the director's report like I used to. So if there's anything in there you have a question about that I can clarify now before we go on to the next agenda item.
Just a comment. I love the new graph for the air quality and PM2, well, PM2.5 is only one, but I love your air quality index chart. I think that is really nice that you, is 2.5 as well.
Yeah.
I just really like seeing them all together. I think that really gives you I'm not normally a visual guy, but I really like that.
Thank you for that.
Any questions online? Janine?
I have too many screens going, sorry. I was trying to find the email I sent to Director Dietrich this morning. So I got the wording right, but I just had, a document come across my desk that had to do with EPA changing the regulations for state implementation plans. I was just curious if at this meeting or a future meeting, if you could speak to any impacts that you could foresee for LRAPA if those changes take place. At least according to this forum, it was a 15-month timeline, and they had some other concerns about some of the regulations that are being proposed. So just curious about that. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it and want to postpone it, that's fine.
Chair Brian and Janine, members of the board, I did take a quick look at it. I also have Max Heffley, who is our operations manager, taking a little bit closer look than I've had time for. But initially, what it looks like is under the 111D of the Clean Air Act, try to infuse more public education, not public education, but public participation and looking into your points about environmental justice and some other considerations along with their SIP revisions that they have to do. And then because your article was more focused on the power industry, there is a threshold in there that you have to have at least 25, I think it's 25 megawatt generating capacity for it to actually be something that needs to be handled in that arena that you're sent to the article about. It may, we don't have anything above that threshold that I'm aware of with the 3 facilities that could possibly be generating their own power above the 25 megawatt. And so it may not affect what we do here at LRAPA, but we're not 100% sure yet. Mike?
So, and another thing is I'm looking through our upcoming board agendas. I'm noticing March does not have much. Or I'm sorry, April. We're in March. But May looks pretty heavy, and I'm just wondering if there's anything we can shift from May back to April without creating a lot of work.
It's quite possible. What we're looking at trying to keep as much open for the budget, not knowing from one month to the next how much extra work we may engage in, but we can certainly shift say the dashboard report back to April, like I mentioned earlier, as a place to put that. Yeah.
Is that going to create too much work for you?
Is June an option, or you really want?
Oh, no. I just, June would be fine as well.
Okay.
I just was kind of looking at the, how heavy that one month is relative to the others and suggesting that we spread them. I don't have any direction other than.
And maybe,
If you're okay, then I would prefer that we
Sure.
pushed it back to June for the dashboard report, just so we really protect the budget time.
Great.
But that's okay. That's okay with Steve.
and maybe when you're formulating the agenda, we can try to balance between the two. months.
Yeah, that's,
Oh, and we likely will have this audit item on next month as
that's the
well.
other thing that has to be taken care of as well. So we'll make some adjustments where we think it makes sense.
Director Keating, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. If without objection, I wanted to go back to a board member comment if I could. Or I want to go back to that spot in the agenda so I could make a comment. My phone was cutting in and out, so I was unable to communicate. May I make just a brief observation / request?
Yes, please.
Thank you. It's difficult to participate as I'm obviously not there in person. And I have a day job. I suspect others are juggling between work and participation. And as the budget committee unfolds, or as it might be even a little too premature to make this request with the budget, with the calendar in front of us. But if we could consider alternating or even exploring evening meetings, I think it would allow for those of us who work during the day to more fully participate and engage now that we're getting back together in person. Just wanted to, I don't suspect or expect a full conversation today, but if we could put that on a future agenda item to discuss and explore the opportunities of altering our schedule of when or where we meet, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And maybe we can get that on the next meeting, just to go around and get a feel for the board and how they feel about an evening meeting. So,
Unless they want to explore it now.
I don't know, are we opposed to talking about it now? We've got some time.
It's easy. I don't want to change it.
Okay.
I will just offer.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I wasn't expecting a full conversation right now because I'd really like to give staff the opportunity to wrap their heads around it and hear from them as well. I'm just not a fan of doing anything on the fly, but I would like to request it for a future agenda item, please.
Yep, we'll queue it up for the next meeting and just get a feel for what the board is thinking. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Steve on the director's report in the room or on the Zoom? Hearing nothing, we'll move on. Discussion, which is number 8, old business status update work session subcommittee.
Yes, Chair Brian, members of the board, I put this on here as a placeholder because last month we were still trying to get enough people to be on the subcommittee, which I think we were successful in last time. So now we just need to figure out what status, if they had a chance to work on anything, and what help do they actually need, either from LRAPA staff or others to proceed. I'll pause there.
So, and I will just offer apologies. I totally forgot all about it until I read the agenda item. And then I was like, oh my gosh. So I don't know if that's something that Travis, I'm not sure if we were gonna have a staff member involved with our discussions or not. But if we could maybe do a poll to see what some time's available. And because I really, email is one of those things that really helps me focus my calendar. And so if I get something to put on there, I'll go, oh, I've got this coming up. I need to read it and go through it. And I apologize, I'm just super busy. So trying to fit that in, I just totally went on to other things that I did not get a chance to. I mean, I perused it once I saw the agenda item, but I beyond that, I don't really have any. I apologize.
So we'll carry it over till next time.
And if I can offer, it sounds like you would, there'd be some help or some coordination in efforts would be appreciated in terms of some getting out a doodle poll to try to look for a time when the subcommittee could meet and potentially have this discussion.
And I would think just a virtual meeting where we could, chat about kind of our thoughts and I would really appreciate the support. as much to help organize us as anything.
We can do a pull out and find a time, and then we'll, because it's more than 2 board members, we'll have to have that be a public meeting. So it'll be on our website for at least 5 days before we can do that. And that discussion will be open for people to participate if they're interested in, but we don't always have public participation.
Howard?
Yeah, in that note too, we do have a small subcommittee to look at creating bylaws, and I've been remiss in looking or doing anything on that. And although I did download the draft document that you'd put together or had posted, and anyway, that may be another effort where we may need the 3 of us, Mike and Brian. I think we agreed to be on that, and that may be another opportunity where we may need to have a face-to-face or a face-to-face virtually to start looking at that. So anyway, just a suggestion.
I can help initiate that ball.
2 birds with 1 stone, maybe.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? Directors or old business? Okay, 9 is new business, and I know we have 1 added item. Do you want to get that one done?
Yes, I can. Chair Brian, members of the board, it was requested, I believe, by board member Joe Pictionary that we add this to the agenda wherever there was time to discuss, and because there either from a clarification or there was a increased interest on the bill itself and just what the status is. And I'll pause there in case you had a different question related to House Bill 3229, which is a bill that was taken in front of the Committee on Energy, get this right, Climate, Energy, and Environment back in the end of February. It's DQ seeking a total of 83% increase in Title V fees, 80% the first year, this year, and 3% the following year, to help cover the cost of the Title V program, which is a requirement under the Clean Air Act. So I don't know if you had a specific question, or you want me to just give you a kind of a lowdown of what's going on there. So after that meeting happened, the next steps that are in place right now is there is a budget hearing that happens on March 27th. In between the February 27th meeting and the March 27th meeting, DEQ is right now talking to stakeholders, because during the February 27th meeting, there was equal amounts of for and against testimony for that fee increase. The purpose of the fee increase, because delegation by each state to run the Title V program, one of the requirements is that the program is completely self-funded by the mechanisms used under the Title V program. And the short-term fix for that 2-year period is one thing that's House Bill 3229 covers with the 80 and the 3% increase. The long-term is work with stakeholders on a more sustainable fee structure. At the same time, the cost per ton that's in statute right now is somewhere around $61 or $66 per ton to help generate fees for the program. Proposals to go to 110. And then along with that, the EQC needs to be given the authority to allow fees to be gradually changed every year. Because the last major fee change was done in 2011. There were no fee changes that occurred, no CPI increases that occurred during the last 2 COVID years. So all that's been happening so far is the $61 or $66 a ton is in statute. It's only been increased by the CPI from 2011 till now, meaning that it's been gradual at best. At most, it's averaged 2% each year, except for the couple of years during COVID when no increase occurred. Because the Clean Air Act requires it that in this case, Oregon, completely fund their program with fees, you run the risk of losing the program. where someone like an EPA would have to run the program, and I don't think anybody wants that. Because they would assess their own fees, and one of the things they'd have a bigger enforcement hammer than the state of Oregon does, so a lot of other implications with not running it at the state level. So this is a long time coming, and it's not just an Oregon problem, it's a national problem as well. Other states are trying to find ways to fund their Title V programs. It's been around since 1990 with the Clean Air Act amendments, and it has it's matured over the last 33 years or so. And in some aspects, the program has been successful because emissions have gone down. The number of Title V sources has gone down. Therefore, the revenues that were plentiful back in the 90s are no longer adequate. Along with that, EPA is coming out at a much higher rate with more NESHAP requirements, national emissions standards for hazardous air pollutants, or other health-based standards or technology-based standards to reduce emissions, not only for criteria pollutants, but also for hazardous air pollutants. And as that new requirements come out, it adds to the complexity of not only initial issuance, but renewal of Title V permits. So the workload is going up while the funding has been going down. And that's, in a nutshell, what House Bill 3229 is designed to try to correct for Oregon. I'll stop there.
Mike,
So I guess I have some questions, we talked about, FTE, based on workload, and I know that we are short-staffed, at least from our historic numbers, from our permit folks who do a wonderful job. But I know that because we're short-staffed, it takes us longer to go through and do these permits, and our Title V has been losing money. But I guess I'm just kind of wondering, is there a national or an Oregon standard about the number of FTE versus Title V, permit holders? Is there, some correlation between what the deficit in revenue is? So I'd love to see that, because 80% does seem like a huge jump. But then again, if it's been a decade or more since there's been an increase, that still seems a little high. But, then again, if the workload has increased tenfold, then maybe it's justifiable. But I guess I would just want to see a lot of that background information to know where I stood, because you also don't want to have such a fee burden that you impact, folks' ability to be able to operate. And so that's the balance.
right. Did you want to say?
I was just going to add that what the fees are supposed to cover is, besides issuing permits, the enforcement aspect of it, the inspections, the monitoring and the reporting, the training for permittees, also small business assistance to the smaller entities out there. It's supposed to cover that as well. Each state does their fee structure a little bit different. Some are doing a better job at others at covering. As far as a direct correlation of, depending on how many Title V sources you have versus permit writers, I'm not sure it's a linear relationship.
Okay.
But, it's something you can guess at. Example, there's 33 positions at DEQ to administer the 102 Title V permits that they have right now. Okay, 11 of those are vacant right now. Or at risk of being vacant. So if this fee increase doesn't happen, you run the risk of losing those 11 vacancies. So that'd be a third of the program, which further exacerbates the workload and the backlog of the permits.
Can I come back to you, Joe? Howard's been waiting for a while. Howard?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for that background on the legislation. It's very helpful, and it's obviously unfortunate that industries is, maybe facing a very large increase in fees. Having, in my professional history, prepared Title V permits for very large and complex facilities with lots of NESHAPs, it's a huge amount of work for applicants, and I know it's a huge amount of work for the regulatory agency to review that. As part of this legislation, has there been any discussion about efficiency increases as far as the process? I know that nationally there's, been some discussion, at least within EPA, about making the whole process a little bit more efficient time-wise, because it is a big effort, especially if you have a lot of niche app sources and things like that. I'd be interested your perspective on that.
Chair Brian and members of the board, that's a great question, Howard. Again, every state handles it a little bit differently. For example, what's working against a little bit time-wise for each staff person to be able to do their Title V permitting as a permit writer is they're also the inspector. So not only is DEQ behind in permitting, they're also behind in inspections because it's the same people working on the same facilities and then some. Also, as time goes on, the complexities are still there that you're familiar with preparing an application. What we're also seeing is that from a source perspective, writing an application for a permit renewal is the level of expertise has seemed to be going down. If the source is not doing it in-house, they're using contractors or consultants to do that work. What we're seeing is a decrease in the amount of experienced consultants able to do that application work. And the quality of the work that comes in, it creates more time from the permit writer, even at LRAPA, to help the application get to the standard that it needs to be before we can actually call it complete and technically complete to issue the permit. That is an ongoing issue that I don't know what the solution is other than finding consultants that are better able to do the job. It contributes to more time back and forth before you have an application you can actually act on, which not an easy answer for that one either.
Yeah, all of us that got started in the business in 1990, we're all old and retired. So, yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'm really concerned about the agency going and asking for an 83% increase with just a small one at 80% the first year and a 3% the second year. To me, that there's some issues with that, big issues in my mind. Secondly, how could they call themselves a good governance if they've allowed themselves to get to this point to sit there and say, oh, shoot, we got to get caught up. We need 83%. What happened? How could I support them when they can't participate in good governance practices? And then you're 11 people short. Is it because they don't have the budget for the 11? Or is they're not able to fill it because they haven't had qualified applicants? That's a big difference.
Chair Joe, members of the board, Joe, I think it's a little bit of both. That skill set is pretty narrow. You don't find permit writers that want to be permit writers as much as you used to when the programs were young, and there was a lot of people learning the Clean Air Act and moving into that line of work. And quite frankly, if they're not doing it from a governance standpoint, they're some of those consultants. So they, that's the universe of where those people thrive. In addition to that, because in Oregon's case, the cost per fee is tied to statute, they're a little less flexible from year to year to change their budget needs, as opposed to other states where it's not in statute. And they have a little bit more flexibility and freedom to make adjustments on a more gradual basis than Oregon has been able to. And the cost of the program continues to go up. So if you don't keep pace a little bit each time, you get farther behind. So
you're saying they were unable to?
They were
were they unable to seek cost increases over the past 20 years?
No, they were unable to change the base fee dramatically from the $61 or $66 a ton that's in statute above CPI. Besides using the CPI to adjust it, it's kind of averaged 2% a year, which is really not enough. Where other states may have been able to adjust some of their CPI or other fees much quicker than what Oregon's been able to.
But you mentioned a year that the last time it was increased, you mentioned a year, and I think it was
2011.
2011. And so are you implying that they haven't sought to increase those rates since 2011, haven't been able to since?
I don't think they have been able to change the $61 fee.
It's in statute.
Because it's in statute. You don't change statute every year.
I agree, but we've had several legislative sessions since then.
They have.
And so I'm just wondering if they have been unable to do that because of law, or is it because they were caught behind?
I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know the answer to that one. That would be a question I'd have to ask DEQ directly just to find out the background there. I'm also only been in Oregon for about 5 years to actually live through the year-to-year ebb and flows. Yeah.
There's the way it's written, the way it sounds to me, there's no way I could support that bill. Absolutely not.
Janine, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So, this board's been talking about the deficit in Title V for probably a year or maybe more since Mike brought it up probably a couple budget cycles ago. So definitely a topic of interest to the board, and can see, that this is something we should be paying attention to, but bring it back locally to our budget and kind of impacts on our LRAPA. I was very surprised to see that the addition of 3 new Title V sources basically turned a negative in our budget into a positive of $7,000 for the 23-24 budget. So if Title V is structurally broken, that doesn't seem to make sense. So I'm just struggling to understand how, with the addition of a couple more sources, which obviously are going to create more staff work, how we're able to, is it just that we're not going to hire, so they're just going to take a long time? Like, I just don't understand the mechanics of how this trickles down into our budget.
Okay, Chair Joe, members of the board, I think I understand your question and trying to get it down to LRAPA's perspective. First off, I want to say that our backlog in Title V versus DEQ's backlog in Title V are 2 different worlds. We had a backlog of, I don't know the exact percentage, but it was above 40% this time last year. And we have now issued 6 Title V permits from this time last year to the end of the calendar year of 2022. So now we only have 2 outstanding Title V permits that need to be reissued. So out of our 14, only 2 need to be reissued.
That's fantastic. I love that news, and I appreciate your focus on trying to get those up to date, Steve. That's fantastic.
Less than 20%, which is usually the level that EPA starts to pay attention if you're either at 20% or dramatically above 20% for a significant amount of time. Our staff, the staff that we have, didn't hire any more staff, very capable and very technical oriented staff buckled down and got it down as a team. And I'm proud of what they did. But I think what helped make that happen is, unlike DEQ, where the same person is also the permit writer and the inspector, we have separate inspectors than we do permit writers. So when you do a concerted effort to knock off, to eliminate a backlog in permitting, it's done by the permitting team while the inspections still go on. I will add, DEQ through the COVID years got woefully behind in their inspections as well. And some of those inspections are commitments you make with EPA in their compliance monitoring strategy, or CMS. And we've been able to maintain, even through COVID, no lateness with our inspection frequency on the largest sources, including our SM80s, which is the next largest source. We're not behind in those at all. And it's due to being able to keep staffing at a level and the right kind of staffing with the right background to be able to do that work in a timely manner. So LRAPA is sitting a lot better when it comes to the work that needs to be done, but we are still facing a similar challenge in a not too distant future on the Title V funding.
If I may, just a follow-up question. So if I'm just parsing this down to somebody who's not living and breathing this every day, it sounds like because we're able to catch up through a concerted effort, we only have 2 in kind of backlog. That means we have potentially 3 coming on, and that the rest are kind of in a maintenance mode, that we feel like we can accommodate that. So we get more revenue, but don't need more staff. So that's why the budget is balancing in a positive way. Did I articulate that correctly?
I think you captured it in a nutshell, yes.
Okay, and then so one more just quick follow-up question or thought to share. So am I also correct to say this bill goes through, DEQ raises their Title V permits, because it sounds like they're in a different situation than we are, 83%, huge number, really difficult for a business to absorb an 83% change in 1 year without a whole lot of notice or runway. So that's, put aside, that's not good governance strategy for someone who's trying to partner with industry for air quality. That's my personal opinion. But that aside, LRAPA is not required to follow that fee structure. Are we in lockstep, or do we are just allowed to raise our Title V permits to the DEQ amount, but no higher?
Chair Brian, members of the board, I'm going to ask Max to help me out here in just a few seconds. I think that is exactly right, but in practice, it makes sense to be similar, or if not exactly the same, with Title V fees, so that we're consistent statewide, rather than have one county that's entirely different than what DEQ administers the other 35 counties. But I think there's some language that maybe Max can point to or share with us that kind of elaborates why we tend to be pretty much in lockstep with DEQ.
So Max is not
Not on.
in there, but we do have a number that's ending 704, I think might.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, hey, Max Sickley, Operations Manager for the record. Yeah, Janine, to your question, LRAPA implements the Title V fee rules in Division 220 by reference. So we have authority from DEQ to implement the whole Title V program, including the fees. So we're essentially at the mercy of what DEQ and what the EQC does each year. One reason for implementing those by reference is that the fees are limited in state statute. So they have a base amount, or an amount by which they increase only by the CPI each year. So there's some state statute limitations that kind of prohibit us or preclude us from doing our own thing. And the other reason we implement those by reference is if we had to increase them by the CPI each year, the board would have to approve that. And also that would have to go to the EQC. So it's a pretty burdensome rulemaking process to do that each year. So we try to avoid that.
Yeah, and thanks, Max. And if I could add, Janine, by comparison, the state of Washington, there's several local air agencies versus their state version of DEQ, which is Department of Ecology. They are not lockstep and barrel with the state agency when they have to adjust their fees. So the local agencies in Washington state have more freedom than what we do working with DEQ in Oregon.
Not personally, I'd like to get really clear with if that's, I understand what you're saying, Max. For CPI increases by reference totally makes sense. You don't need the board to increase a fee by 2% of $61 every year, every 2 years. So that totally makes sense to me. But this is such a substantial and kind of unusual event. We haven't changed the base fee since 2011. This is not something that happens all the time. And I believe the value proposition for being the last remaining local air agency is that we do business better than the state. I think that's something that's a value proposition that we should be cherishing and singing from the rooftops and passing along a increase that we can't reconcile with our own budget needs. is in complete contrast with that. I'd really struggle with that. I hope that that's not, too soon to say how this legislation's all gonna pan out. Happy that we're paying attention to it, but if it does go through with a significant increase, I would want a legal opinion about what our options are locally.
Chair Brian and members of the board, I will tell you that since that meeting on February 27th, DEQ's been having stakeholder meetings because some of the scenarios they're being asked to consider is, what if it's not 80% the first year, but something less? And versus the 3% that happens the second year. So I think they are exploring other scenarios to find out what's the absolute minimum they actually need to have versus the staff they need to do the work.
Thanks. Joe, you were first. Did you have that?
Yeah. So Jenny and I agree with you. I think that all that bill does is puts us in a position of between a rock and a hard place between our users. In fact, I think the state permit 5 holders, the numbers of them have dropped. Okay, and so you have an agency that regulates Title V permit holders that have dropped, their customer level has dropped. But yet they're asking for an 82 or 82% increase to work with less Title V permit holders. And then they're also claiming that they want to hire 11 more people. And to me, that is not how LRAPA does business. LRAPA is much more efficient. That is the worst demonstration or illustration of poor governance I've seen in years. And whether they're quote unquote like discussing lower rates now is irrelevant. The bill was written as it's written, and I cannot see how LRAPA could in any form stand behind them and say, yes, let's do it, because we're going to look like, well, yeah, let's do it because we're going to have a big fat paycheck. To me, it is absolutely against what LRAPA stands for. And we stand for good governance. That up there is poor governance at its best.
If I can respond just in brief here is that, our Title V monies, what we have left over each year has been steadily going down as well. It's not going to be long before we're going to be not able to pay the bills, so to speak, when it comes to Title V monies that's needed. So we'll be in the same boat here. Susanna will be able to get to the bottom of whether it's this year or next year, that we won't have a positive left over at the end of the year.
After the new permitting? We don't know that.
I don't know that.
We're not, that's not in our formulas at
That's
all.
not a fair statement.
But I don't know what it's going to be here soon. Had those 3 not been on the horizon, we'd be there quicker.
But they are.
So I completely support or adopting the rules by reference. I mean, oh my gosh, we were doing some of this at our city. And so every time one of the regulatory bodies, government or state, changes something, then you're constantly changing it to match those rules. So I totally agree with sticking by reference. But I also look at like the sheriff having a bond measure where they're not actually not utilizing the full revenue from that. So I think there's probably a mechanism, whether it's us, rebating a portion back to the permittees or just, charging less upfront. I think that there's opportunity there. I can't imagine that the rules require us to keep those funds. So what I would want to do is, I think is a great idea for us to do now, look at what we need, to keep our revenue stable. And then if there's, if this does pass and there's, more funding than we need, we can, direct that, whether upfront or behind, back to those permittees. I think that's, kind of the win-win for everybody.
I hear what you're saying. Unfortunately, the intangibles are, when it comes to the small business assistance or that scenario I described earlier, where an application comes in and it needs a lot of work. It's not the consultant that turns around and does a lot of that work. It's been our staff.
And just to clarify, I want us to take a very fair look at what our overhead is. And I think that, justifiable. In fact, if we need more FTE, let's look at that. That's why I was kind of asking, what is kind of the standard, and then, also what are our particulars? But like I said, I've been complaining, as Janine mentioned, I've been complaining for at least 2 years about the fact that our permit fees have not been keeping up with our overhead. And so I fully support our gaining some more revenue from whatever fashion. But if this that they're requesting is dramatically more than we actually need, I also would suggest let's work on a mechanism to refund whatever that difference is, giving us a fair analysis of our overhead, and maintaining the stability of that fund. And then directing the rest of it back.
Break even.
Yeah.
Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's my understanding that Representative Paul Holvey is carrying this bill. Has anyone had any conversations with the representative about a potential amendment that underscores the autonomy of our agency and getting there more incrementally than just that one spike of 80 some percent that there's clearly consternation and concern being expressed at the table today?
Chair Brian, members of the board, Matt, I think I'm pretty sure Paul Holvey is the sponsor of 3229. You're correct. I have not had a conversation with any legislature in Lane County about this yet. Unlike what I did 2 years ago when we were trying to restore some policy option packages that were part of DEQ's bill that would bring some of the 105 monies back to LRAPA. So I did that 2 years ago and it was successful. But no, I have not reached out yet. Part of me pausing to do that, and I have talked to some DEQ liaison between the legislature and DEQ as late as yesterday. They're doing the stakeholder meetings to figure out, is there a smaller number that everyone can be amenable to? And those scenarios that you just described about a more gradual is being discussed. I haven't been part of those discussions because it's been with the stakeholders in DEQ. But what is still on the horizon is a possibility to talk to the legislatures about not only DEQ's needs, but also LRAPA's needs from our representatives in Lane County.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. Any other new business? You ready to adjourn?
If I may, this isn't new business, but just to kind of close this conversation. So it sounds like there's stakeholder meetings. Is this bill scheduled for another hearing or what? And now that we've spent 45 minutes talking about it, how can the board help support or stay engaged in this conversation moving forward, since it does clearly have an interest and an impact on our budget? I don't want to just walk away from this table and then come back in a month and it's gone through and and we're all surprised. So what are our next steps as a board, or how do we stay in the loop on what's happening?
Chair Brian, members of the board, Janine, I have a phone call scheduled with Aaron Teverbog, who actually is liaison with the legislature with DEQ, to find out what is on the horizon for more stakeholder meetings between now and March 27th, when the budget hearing occurs. So I could try to gather that information, and if it's something that the board or somebody as a representative of the board can participate in, I'll get that information to them.
Go to Jeff.
Yeah, I just, moving forward, like we're kind of close the loop, so to speak, what Janine was talking about, is that from me hearing the board members, I'm not confident if there is board stating there is support for this bill.
Yeah.
And so I would not like to have people think that.
Okay.
I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that the board wants to monitor and has some concerns about the direction it's going. I think it'd be helpful for us to maybe, in a week or so, Steve, if maybe you can send an email to the board, just kind of what's the status? Or if there are amendments to the bill, maybe you'd be able to send those out to us. I don't know if the board wants to take a formal position. We typically have not done that in the past, but these are good conversations for us to have because we won't be together again until after this public hearing or when the next conversation happens. So I'm just trying to not have us be in a weird situation between now and then. So, and I'm happy to, act as, since I didn't volunteer for the subcommittees, I'll put myself out there. I'm happy to act as kind of a point person between Steve and the rest of the board. But if we're going to talk, Steve, it's just probably, I don't know, that saves us any time versus just kind of an email summary of where we're at. And if the, chair and vice chair need to get together on a conversation and in between, I'll leave it to them, but.
So, I have to ask this question, and forgive me if it's not the right time to bring it up. But because DEQ is a state agency, they are not allowed to talk to legislatures about this bill.
That's true.
However, a LRAPA can, for whatever message that needs to go out. Are you suggesting that the board doesn't want to have a position on this bill, that I'm prohibited from talking to legislature that in Lane County about the bill?
I don't think the board's taken a position. I think that's what I'm trying to avoid, putting you in this difficult situation of being asked to be engaged without the direction of the rest of the board. So what I'm trying to find a way for us to help support a consolidated approach here versus where we are right now.
So my thought would be, like you said, Janine, it's a monitor situation right now. We want to make sure that we know what's going on in Salem with this initiative. Okay. And does the board want to make a motion to not have a position right now until we know more?
I would absolutely like to make that position and a motion.
Okay. My question related to that's fine if that's what we want to do, but because of the pace at which these things unfold during the legislative session, it may not happen in sync with when we have another board meeting. So it may be difficult to be able to have a meeting to discuss with more than one board member present at a time, to be able to have a stance that I or someone can carry forward to the legislature.
In response to that, I believe it's lawful for you to put out an information email and the respondents don't respond in mass or to anybody, as long as it's just sent out as an informational and the people in that email as recipients have that information to read. They don't need to respond, nor should they.
Okay. Yeah, I normally would put them in the BCC
That's
column.
right.
Yeah, so they can't respond to
Right.
everybody
Right.
and create a serial meeting.
And that provides some information. I think, Janine, what you're talking about, I always appreciate you because you're always right there. I mean, serious, you're always on point. I think that would be great. And I understand what you're trying to do to help kind of be a liaison, but I personally would rather hear it from the bird's mouth, so to speak, and not have to put you in that position either. So that way the board has that. And if we have a question of Steve, we're free to do that.
I would say if there comes a time when we need a position, we can call it 24-hour special session and get together, need be virtually, if that's acceptable, and we'll.
I think the idea of the board not taking a position on this is important in that I've already made a motion for that position.
Okay, so the motion's made by Joe.
Point of information.
Sure, Matt.
I heard a motion, but I haven't heard a second for the motion. So
That's right.
there was a second?
No,
There has not been a second.
saying that motion was made by Joe.
I need to second this.
Is there a second?
Janine, did I hear you second that, Janine?
No, I was just agreeing that there hadn't been a second. And I don't want to prolong this conversation too far, but I feel like there's a nuanced approach here that we could take that maybe allows Steve to have some guide rails But again, I don't know that we're able to be here for 3 hours nuancing a message, and I don't want to, so I could second the motion for the purpose of having a further conversation about it, or we can just do what I think the chair was suggesting, which is just be in a monitoring mode, take no position, stay neutral, and until we get some more information. I think either of
Thank
those
you,
are
Janine.
fine by me.
Janine articulated well what I was trying to say by prefacing that there was no second. I submit that it's a little inappropriate for us to take such a significant action without properly noticing, but also there's still a pathway for an LRAPA or for a pathway for LRAPA's footprint to be on this that doesn't overburden business in our community so significantly. I recognize the pain points that have been brought up. I recognize, when Joe and Janine are on the same page, it's worth paying attention to. And I think that the sound approach is to continue to monitor and to find a pathway through the legislative process that underscores the autonomy of LRAPA, while also still getting to a place that we need to be a helpful partner. And just to press pause or just to say no is not an appropriate avenue. So I think that Janine's approach, board chair's approach to monitor is a sound one. And I look forward to updates about how the legislation can be altered or tweaked or amended to best serve LRAPA's interests.
Thanks, Matt and Joe. I'll get to you in a minute, but Howard's been there for a bit. Howard?
Yeah, I concur with what Janine and Matt has said. This legislation is probably going to change a lot between now and whenever it's heard for a vote. And I think it's, important that Steve has the ability to keep tabs on it. But with that, though, the Title V program is supposed to be self-funding, and it's unfortunate that it's been so long since there's been increases in the fees, and just increasing by CPI is obviously not sufficient. I mean, salaries go up a lot more than consumer price indexes, especially in an area like this where the supply and demand of people with expertise and knowledge don't match. So I support what Janine and Matt has said. Thank you.
Joe?
Listening to you folks, contrary to maybe what you think, but I do listen to you very closely. Janine, you do make sense. I'm going to withdraw my motion with the added comments that I think I agree. We probably shouldn't take a stance per se, support or oppose, but I think that we should stand silent. As Howard was indicating that the legislation is going to take a while. Steve's indicated it's going to take a bit, but I think it would be wise for LRAPA to stand silent on the issue and see how it formulates, and then pick a time in which it's best for LRAPA to jump up and be heard at that time and say, okay, this is making sense to us. We can get behind it as a board. Does that sound fair? I mean, that's not even a motion, but that's a plan.
Matt, is that an old hand or do you have a new question?
Yeah, I don't understand the request. How do we participate in the process if we're standing silent? I fundamentally disagree with that approach. I think I hear what Joe's saying, but I don't see how that's in our interest.
Matt, that's a figure of speech. In courts they use that a lot. So
Maybe it's another way to say this, Joe, is for the organization, for Steve to monitor, for us not to take any public positions at this point, and to maintain more of a neutral posture till the board knows more, and then give us an opportunity to weigh in more formally.
Yeah, Matt, it's still not. Yeah, definitely to stay engaged and watching it and moving along with it for sure. I'm not saying stand back on a rock and see where the rock hits a puddle.
And not inhibit the
Right,
executive
right.
director from engaging to monitor, to help monitor.
Right, but to see where we're, as a board, where we're at before we actually pull a trigger on.
I hear,
think
so
we're all in
I
agreement.
just don't want to tie the hands of the executive director. I want the executive director to do their job, and I don't want this board to get in a position of micromanaging or second guessing the executive director. I think the input we've all provided today is helpful input to provide the guidelines and guardrails that are needed and necessary without a formalized motion or without tying the hands of the director of the agency. I want the director of the agency to be right there in those stakeholder meetings, making this as good of a bill as possible for LRAPA and our community. And I think it's inappropriate to take any formalized or wink and a nudge action to the contrary.
Mike?
Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation. I really think that I think our director certainly has very clear, direction from us in that, I think that we all recognize this is an issue. I think now there's very clear, hey, this might be way too much. I would also not want to tie our director's hands, as he mentioned. These committee or hearings can come up in, a very short period of time. I know how busy I am trying to schedule a work session, for going over our bylaws, and I would hate for us to miss an opportunity because we couldn't get enough consensus or, what have you. So while I certainly agree this is a policy area where the board should weigh in, I think we have now. And I think this has been a very valuable conversation. I really would like us to reach out to legal counsel about if this does go through, what are our options? Can we do some sort of reduced rate or a rebate of some sort? I think that that's the win-win for all of us, where DEQ can get their budget managed, we can get our budget managed while trying to be responsive to our business community. I mean, but that's kind of my 2 cents worth, is I would not want to tie our hands to be able to react quickly because we just won't, as a group, be able to.
Yeah. And Matt, definitely, please don't misunderstand me. I don't. And Steve knows me well enough for sure, and everybody else knows me well enough for sure, that I would not want to tie Steve's hands. It's a matter of communication. It's a matter of where the board stands. It's just a matter of moving through. It's what you're saying is I'm not trusting Steve, and that's not at all a fact or the truth. I do. So don't misunderstand me there. But and I agree with Mike just now. My biggest thing right here is what are we as a LRAPA, who we've been taking care of our region on our own for so many years, is that part of that taking care of our region too is also taking care of our partners, which are not the entities of agencies, it's also our permittees. Those are our partners. And so we have an obligation, I have an obligation to help take care of those communities, or that the business community's best interest, as long as they're doing their business right. I shouldn't be any part of putting such an onus on them that it's going to be harmful to them. That's why I get so heartfelt.
Steve, any questions or comments? I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate knowing where the board stands. And, these things do happen fast with the legislative sessions. Case in point, when the meeting happened on February 27th, which was a Monday, I learned about it on Friday afternoon. So wouldn't have been much time to talk to the board.
So for the board, yeah, be ready to react quickly if we need to make some sort of a discussion, have a discussion or create a position. So with that, if there's nothing more, we'll go to adjournment. I've already robbed you of 35 extra minutes of your day.
Wow, some new chair you are.
Board members just kept going on and on. I don't know who it was. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Matt, I do appreciate your comments. I do. And I really like.
I think a spirited conversation is healthy for the organization. Thank you all.
Yeah, see ya.
Yeah.